a Noble Media Group member.
America's known our share of tyrants. In response to tyranny, we created one of the greatest guiding documents ever written by mankind. We stood for what was right. We've also made mistakes, but we corrected those mistakes by fighting for what was right both inside our borders and beyond. Today, America faces another challenge: Christian nationalism. Misguided faith and misguided patriotism justifying misguided deeds.
Return the hearts of those who are in power and position to make decisions.
That's the line.
That's not who we are, America. The Constitution is as true today as the day it was ratified. America stands for freedom, and America stands for doing what's right. And it's time we start restoring the American dream. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Restoring the American Dream. Michael, welcome. It's what a day. We are, 2 days away from the 250th birthday of our country. Wow.
Amen. It's amazing to me. I remember 1976, of course, everybody does the bicentennial, 200 years. And 50 years later, we're celebrating 250 years. And honestly, I've always been a lover of history, of our history. But honestly, I have been binging on the American experiment and various venues and
100%.
various books. And, I'm listening to 2 books and, watching. It's just like, but it's been saturating and it's been fun. And it's actually been exciting for me. And honestly, Brian, it's been eye-opening. As much of the history as I know about, I have been shocked by, just kind of like, it was such a bloody revolution. It was so that's why this experiment is really, it always in a delicate balance. We're always at that, the cusp of disaster, because that was in our DNA. I mean, that was how this country was born, out of desperation, for people desperate to be free. And if we come into this, in this generation right now, we have got to have that same sense of desperation, not to overcome tyrants per se, but to continue to pursue the ideals of the American dream.
Man, that was great. I completely agree with you. I know that you and I have talked completely offline. It doesn't really fit into what we're going to talk about tonight, but you're talking about the Netflix episodes and how great and fabulous they were, and the brutality and reality of what was happening with America. And I haven't gotten a chance to watch those yet, but man, after your recommendation, wow. Okay, so
Yeah, yeah. It's eye-opening, and and being here in Philadelphia for me, it's like, whoa,
oh my
this
gosh,
is
yeah,
where it
yeah.
all
Kind of the
started.
birthplace, right? The
It's the
birthplace of
birthplace,
this.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
The Declaration was signed
yeah.
here 250 years ago. It was signed, it was penned, by Thomas Jefferson, and just the whole story of where he was in the inn, and how he, took him 2 days to write it, and he came back and he got revisions, and how everybody signed off on this declaration, and they declared they were free of British rule. And
Incredible.
whoa, it shocked the shock heard around the world, right?
Now
And in eternity.
isn't there a so I haven't seen it yet, and I know we're getting a little off subject, but there's a movie that was coming out about George Washington. Have you seen that yet? It was the kind of the young George Washington, and I thought it was I don't think it's Netflix. I think it's like on the movie theaters, and I could be wrong. I apologize, but I found the book.
There's so much out there right now. I'll be honest with you. There's a whole lot out there right now, and much of it's telling the same kind of stories, the same it's just a different spin on it and a different. That's why I really love the Netflix piece, because it was clear that they had done the scholarly work.
They did
And
the work.
even though they did the homework, I mean, because I've read like four books, and on the American Revolution, and Valley Forge, and it's just the past, I guess, 6 months or so. It's just been a thing, because before that, the very other parts of my life, the Civil War was that kind of
Right.
preoccupation.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, but the subject for tonight was
Yes.
the free and fair elections, the backbone of democracy,
It is.
part two.
It
And
is.
it was great having Robert George on. Man, Robert I'm so looking forward to having him on more often. And I mean, this guy is he's a major figure and a
He
major
is.
thinker,
He is.
and
Yeah.
has done some very, very important work, and continues to do that in terms of getting citizens involved in
Yeah.
this democracy.
And I'll say too, for our audience that's watching, he's agreed to start being a part of this and what we're doing here at the network. And yeah, it's going to be a blessing.
Yeah.
I like the guy. I mean, he's extremely knowledgeable. I mean, he's likable. He knows his stuff. He knows what he's talking about. And I'm with you. So let me jump back when we were talking about this. This was part two. When we were talking about this, we jumped into the SAVE Act, Michael, and I wonder if it would be curious what you think, but would it be helpful if we jump to that slide where we just, for 5 seconds, just talk about the SAVE Act and
Yep.
and why we went there to begin with? Then let's go ahead and do that.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and just read again, folks. Go back and watch the other show where we deep dive this. I don't necessarily think it's necessary right now, but the SAVE Act was, quote, proof of citizenship for registry, national photo ID mandate, absentee mail-in ballot rules, and a federal database from the state, so the federal government can audit the voting rolls. We deep dived this before. We identified why what the problems were with it, and why it's not going to pass Congress. It's certainly not going to get through the Senate, and some of the difficulties with it. But the underlying goal that you brought up, Michael, was why it's important that we have free and fair elections, and that people believe in those free and fair elections. So I'll hand it back off to you, because this is definitely something you're passionate about.
Oh yeah, because I had always said from the very beginning, the peaceful transfer of power. We talked about that. In one of the shows, I think it was maybe the Netflix show. They said that John Adams, when he saw George Washington in the audience as he was taking the oath of office, he wept. It was just like that moving moment. I mean, nobody could believe that somebody with all the power would give it up, to transfer that to another individual, despite the fact that he was tired.
Mm-hmm.
He literally held the army together, won the revolution, so forth and so on. But that the way he did it, just seeing that, and so in order to have the peaceful transfer of power, citizens have to participate. And so we have a republic, right? We don't have a pure democracy. In pure
That's right.
democracy,
Yeah.
everybody's
Votes on
vote
everything.
votes on everything, right? That's
Yeah.
I was ordained as a Baptist, and that's what Baptists have. Oh my goodness, everything is take a vote. Everybody has a voice. Everybody has a vote, right? And so we don't have a pure democracy. We have a republic, which means we elect representatives to carry our interests
That's right.
forward. But
That's
the
right.
election of those that in the republic, we have to feel like our voice matters and
That's
our
right.
vote matters in the people that we elect to do our bidding. And one of the things that has happened over the past, and we've been knowing this for years, so this is not new, but there's a dramatic drop off in the number of people that are voting,
Yeah.
and why, and
And
in
especially the
certain
young voters.
demographic,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
especially in the young voters. And honestly, that's scary.
It is.
That's scary. Because if you have young voters, and the only young voters that are voting are Democratic Socialists of America, then hello, we are in for, because what's the truth of the matter is, it doesn't take a majority to change anything.
Yeah.
It just takes a committed minority. And that's the way we've seen it. It's like 20% of people, literally. So 20% of the people, if they're committed to something, and then they're probably 30% or 20% at the other end of the thing, they're dead set against it. And then in the middle, that 60%, they're kind of waiting to see who's going to win.
Yeah.
They're kind of, and that's just human nature, right? And so when we talk about the number of people that vote, what we have to engage everybody is to say, hey, if you have a voice, if you have an opinion, let's make it be known, let it be known. But Brian, you brought up something that's very, very interesting, which is the percentage of people whose votes, in essence, I don't want to say don't count, but they're not in contested races
Yeah.
in their districts. And so, in essence, their votes don't count. I mean, I live in a heavily Democratic city. And I have, even in New York, it was, but living in Philadelphia. And so if I don't vote in the Democratic primary, if once the primary is over, things are pretty much decided.
Yeah.
But that's decided through clubhouse politicians, and through clubhouse politics, and through the primary process, which isn't a general election.
That's right. So I'll
You
just
know,
share the slide if I can, Michael. I know you and
sure.
I've talked, and this is I'll if you've followed me through the years, and even before we started the Noble Media Group. So I came out of the third party election reform side of the stuff in the country. And we can't cover this tonight completely, Michael. Matt, it's a deep dive subject that takes a lot of time, but I just want to share something with you that I've given speeches about across the country and talk to different people about, because it's just so depressing. So let me just share that, and we're going to move on to why free and fair elections are really important. But let me just share one slide with everybody if you're watching. So it says, and this is from NPR. And I can tell you it's not just NPR. I can quote a gazillion other news agencies, but I'm going to read it to you. Only about 10%, which is 42 out of 435 congressional districts, are considered highly competitive battlegrounds for the upcoming House elections. Across the country, frequent mid-decade redistricting and aggressive gerrymandering have solidified the vast majority of the seats, leaving only a fraction of districts up for grabs. I live in one of those districts.
Mm,
I actually, as a conservative, this last election cycle, I helped Marie Gluesenkamp Perez get elected. I endorsed her publicly, went on television for her and radio and blah blah blah. And she won in this district, I think, by a little under 5,000 votes. But this district is an exception, and when you only have a fraction of the districts that are actually competitive, then the general election is irrelevant. It's who wins the primary, and who goes out to vote in the primary is important, because the vast majority of the folks in that district don't vote in it. And the ones that do are usually the most politically active and the most on the fringe.
Yeah.
Some states even have laws that prevent you from voting in an open primary. In other words, you can't vote who you think is the best Republican and the best Democrat. You got to pick one or the other, and it's a broken system. But this goes back to what you were talking about, I think earlier, and um, you know what what makes the strength of a democracy, Michael?
Well,
Is it who wins the election, or because you gave me a great quote earlier, and I actually put it in a slide, and I'd like,
yep,
if it's okay, and not to embarrass you, but if it's okay, I'd like to read it to everybody,
yep.
and because I think what you said is just right on cue. So Michael said the strength of a democracy is not determined by who wins the elections, but whether the people believe the election was conducted honestly, fairly, and transparently.
Yeah, yeah.
100%.
Because it's our faith in democracy which makes us participate. Because apathy is the enemy of democracy, right? Because
Yes,
apathy,
yes, yes.
when people are apathetic, they don't participate. They feel like, oh, it's just a fait accompli, or my voice doesn't count, my voice doesn't matter. Well, here's the problem with us as 250-year-old America. Early America, it was like we were a pimple on the butt of a fly, in terms of to world powers.
Yeah,
Now
that's
we
true.
are
That's
right,
true.
right. So we had to. So every single thing that we did mattered greatly. Every war, every tax, everything. Now that we are a global superpower, I don't want to say the most powerful nation in the world, but I will say one of them, right? One of the top three. In terms of economy, yes, our economy dwarfs everybody else's. That has great responsibility, because if we don't participate, if our citizens don't participate in continuing the good ideals of America. America's not perfect, but we believe that our founding documents and the direction is the best system on earth, except is the best system on earth. We just believe that, right? But clearly it unleashed, the 250 years, ago, it unleashed, things began, the feudal system fell on that day.
Right,
It
right,
was
right.
it
Yeah,
was just
yeah,
it
yeah.
just fell. And now today we don't have many, feudal monarchies still left. It's almost like every country in the world has some form of constitutional representation, even if it's a farce, even strong communist countries. But what the point I want to make is, if we lose faith in the one thing that citizens have to do, our responsibility, then, to be honest, all bets are off, because we cannot maintain global power or global leadership with despots leading us. We just can't. We have to have citizen legislators that show up, that do the people's bidding. We have a system of checks and balances. You can't, have one system say, oh, because, one branch of government say, oh, I didn't like the Supreme Court's decision, I'm going to overturn
That's
it.
right.
You
Yeah.
can't
Can't do it.
overturn
Yeah.
it. That's
Yeah.
the point.
That's
It's a
right.
check and a balance system. And when you've been checked, it's and there are certain things that Congress is supposed to do. There's certain things that the executive branch has to do. And those things have to be regulated by what? By a court of laws, by the rule of law. And if you say, oh, I'm not going to abide by the rule of law, what do we have?
That's right.
And it's the same way with elections. If people feel that elections are really rigged, and that our system doesn't work, uh, I'm sorry, that's a sad, sad day. And there are many people, many Americans that are apathetic, that are apathetic about their vote, about voting, about the democratic process. They are apathetic because of what they see in the media, what they see on television, and so forth and so on. And it weakens the entire system
Yeah.
because they feel like, well, what's the use? I remember, Brian, when I was campaigning, when I was running for Congress in Harlem. I'd go out and now I was running as a Republican. I had a snowball's chance of beating a 40-year incumbent. Snowball's chance. I mean, Snowball had a better chance than I. But I still let people know they could vote for me because many people said, "Oh, I'm a registered Democrat. I can't vote for you." Oh no, you can. Yes, you can. And just informing people of what their rights were, and talking to everyday voters, it was stimulating for me. It was eye-opening for me. I enjoyed the process. I highly recommend it to anybody who is a citizen. I just think it's our responsibility to challenge power, to speak truth to power. I think it is. But for everyday citizens to know that their voice counts, their vote counts, and they have to vote. Now, even in losing elections, their vote counts because the numbers count. And the numbers, the data is
Yeah.
all aggregated and it moves things
It
along.
will, because the next person running is going to be looking at not just who voted for, but who voted against, and that's going to change their calculus about what they're going to do and whether or not they can get elected, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I agree with you completely. I've got to, so on a broader discussion, and I'm going to circle back around to this. As we're at 250 years of this experiment, are you concerned at all about some of the efforts and legislation that is trying to be pushed that could limit or restrict a person's ability to vote? Because I'll give you an example of this, and I'll share a quick slide, but it's something you and I have talked about a few times, and it's actually very concerning to me. But the SAVE Act wanted to add an ID factor, which the majority of Americans agree with, but it went a lot further than that. And this is just an example. This isn't where we're necessarily going to go, but let me just read to you why I was concerned about the SAVE Act and something you and I have talked about. So it required and I've got a slide up here, it required proof of citizenship, it required a certain government ID. But here's the problem with it. It was that 9% of all eligible voters do not have easy access to documentary proof of citizenship. So that would be roughly 10%, 1 in 10. 52% of registered voters do not have an unexpired passport with their current legal name. I'm going to come back to that one. 11% of registered voters do not have access to their birth certificate. Um, you know, I I want to share a little personal story, and then I want your take on this because this was part of the SAVE Act that the president was really pushing and members in the Republican Party. So I went with my newly adopted mother. It was I made a promise to my dear friend on his deathbed that I would take care of his mom. And so she wanted to go for. I took her to go to get her ESL. That's it. Do you have that, Michael? The special license that you've got to get and blah blah blah. Well, they wouldn't give it to her because she did not have a registered and certified um, birth certificate. Mind you, that she's 75 years old, born out in the sticks somewhere. And she didn't have a certain birth certificate with it, that was registered, so she couldn't get her ESL. And I bring this up because it's an important factor of what you've been talking about, and that is, if we're going to have free and fair elections and people are going to believe they're free and fair elections, then when we put restrictions up that prevent people from being able to vote, and that driver's license is a great example of federal interference in being able to vote, that's a problem. And so I'm going to circle that back to you because that was a major point of our last discussion. Um, does it bother you at 250 years in that a major
Right.
party is trying to circumvent certain people or make it really hard for them to vote because they know they wouldn't vote for them?
Absolutely. We're back to the days of
Jim Crow.
white male landowners, right? That's very specific. White male landowners. That's where we started. So free and fair elections for them, it was like that was who's gonna, and guess what? Who was gonna be elected? Another white male landowner. Now that women have the right to vote, we don't check, anybody's anybody's LGBTQ status. We don't check anybody's racial. So none of those things, all of those things are illegal. You can't check those things. Why in the world would we want to put hindrances to American citizens voting? Yes,
Thank you.
get the fact
Thank
that
you.
we do not want to people who are not legal citizens to vote. I get that. However, we want everyone who is and now when I was campaigning a lot in New York, I would run into convicted felons who had served time, and they would say, "Oh, I'm a convicted felon. I can't vote." I said, "Who says?" You see, because there were certain laws that said, "Hey, for certain laws, for certain offenses, you lose the right." But not every convicted felon loses the right to vote, and that law has been, back and forth.
Yeah, back. Yeah.
It's been, kind of pushed back, pushed back and forth. But here's the point: if we don't have the majority of Americans, or everyone that wants to willingly participate in this democracy, in this republic, participating freely, if we throw roadblocks now, the reason that we're doing it has nothing to do with immigration.
No, no, it doesn't. I agree.
It has everything to do with politics and political interest, and that is the worst reason in the world
Yes,
to
sir.
undermine free and fair elections.
Yes,
That's
sir.
the worst reason in the world to
Yes, sir.
undermine free and fair elections.
Yes, sir.
Because we're undermining democracy in the name
Yes,
of
sir.
politics, in the name of partisan politics. It's crazy. And when the pendulum swings back, when the Democrats are in power, if they're doing the same
Gonna
thing,
do the same
it's like,
thing.
what are we doing, folks? What are we doing? We're killing ourselves. And we can't do that. We can't allow that to happen. Free and fair elections, the peaceful transfer of power have got to be the bulwark of American democracy. It's the backbone, it's the cornerstone. Everything rides on that. And when someone wants to undermine it, guess what? They're subverting this democracy that we care so much about.
Damn right.
That's why the strength of a democracy is not determined by who wins elections, but by the people who believe in the election, and that they believe and have faith in it, that it's conducted honestly and fairly with transparency.
Michael, I couldn't agree with you more. And that was like the perfect quote. I'm going to ask you again, and we've talked about this on and off, but we're 250 years into this experiment. And we talked about this before, but are you enthusiastic with where America is now? Are you, how do you feel about 250 years in and what we've done right and what we've done wrong?
Well, so I really believe it's in God's hands. And let me tell you why I say that. Because for 250 years, we've always been on the brink of disaster. One after another, after another, after another. I mean, and the Civil War, everything, the wagon wheels came off. And it was like, I've done such a deep dive into the American Revolution and in the Civil War and seeing how close things have been. I've got to believe, and then just throughout history, the bloody road that we have gone down in order to arrive here where we are, I've got to believe that it's in God's hands.
God has
in
a
terms
hand
of
in
it,
this.
because as I look at things, I'm like, yeah, it doesn't look good, because if you analyze the data and analyze where we are and analyze what's happened before, we can look at this and stuff, and just looking at the numbers, it doesn't look good. But I believe, in God's hand. One of the things that's happening, rise in public anti-Semitism, and that's a
Yeah.
very scary thing to happen, because as a follower of Jesus, I cannot be, anti-Semitic, and I can't tolerate anti-Semitism, because, for a number of myriad of reasons. But anyway, things are happening here, and things are being said that we need to challenge.
I agree. It's such a big year for both of us. That we've seen
Mm.
the 200 and we've seen the 250 now. I'd love to think I'm going to see the 300. But I might be stretched it just and asking a little bit too much of the good Lord Jesus, but we'll see. Thanks everybody for joining us tonight, Michael. It's just such a pleasure hearing your upbeat and your comments, and I really appreciate it. Folks, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our network. You're going to get to watch this show. You'll get to watch the Noble Political Arena. We do our Thursday Thoughts. You'll get to watch the Hinge of History. We've got some other shows that we're going to be starting soon. We've got a number of new guests, actually, that are going to be starting. We had one just a couple of days ago on Michael's show. His name is Robert George. And some folks that have, really have a big impact in politics and very well known. And so it's going to be a fun time. I don't get to see you again, Michael, until after our country's birthday. I hope you have a wonderful time with it, my dear friend. And to all those that are watching, enjoy it. It's the great experiment 250 years later, still going. We've got a lot of problems we've got to fix. But I think between, Michael's and so many of the other shows and people that are passionate about it, I think we can get through it. I do.
Yeah.
So thanks, Michael, once again.
All right.
And
Well,
thank you,
God bless you,
everybody.
and keep praying for America. God bless America.
We will. And everyone stay safe for the 4th and have a wonderful time. We'll see you next
Thank
time.
You've been watching Reverend Michael's Restoring the American Dream. The Noble Media Group is on all major social media platforms. Make sure to give us a follow so you can watch this show and many others.
A Noble Media Group member.